The Grand Chamber of Valanthos Prime was the largest structure ever built by intelligent life. It floated in the empty space between three dying stars, drawing power from their fading light. For 12,000 years, the Galactic Council had met here to decide the fate of civilizations. 47 species sent their representatives to sit in seats designed for bodies that came in every shape imaginable. Some delegates floated in anti-gravity fields. Others coiled around platforms made of living crystal. A few existed as pure energy, contained in special vessels that hummed with ancient power. The Cathari had held the position of speaker for 300 years. They were beings made of living crystal, and they communicated through sounds that most species could not hear without special equipment. Their current speaker was old even by their standards, and she had seen empires rise and fall like waves on a cosmic ocean. Nothing surprised her anymore, or so she believed. On this particular day, the chamber was full. Every species had sent their representatives for the quarterly session. Most expected nothing unusual. The agenda was boring, filled with trade agreements and minor territorial disputes. The Virax delegate, a massive creature with 6 limbs and scales that could stop a laser blast, was already half asleep. His species had conquered 3 star systems before joining the council, and they found politics deeply tedious. Then the human delegation arrived. Humanity had been granted provisional membership only 6 standard cycles ago. In galactic terms, this was less than a heartbeat. New species were expected to sit quietly, observe the proceedings, and learn how civilized beings conducted their affairs. Most species spent their first few centuries simply trying to understand the complex rules and traditions of the council. They certainly did not speak during sessions. They absolutely did not make proposals. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked onto the speaking platform as if she owned it. She was a small woman by human standards, with dark hair pulled back from her face and eyes that missed nothing. She wore a simple black suit that looked almost primitive compared to the ceremonial robes. Bioluminescent garments and gravity-defying costumes of the other delegates. A small drone floated beside her, ready to translate her words into the hundreds of languages spoken in the chamber. The Cathari speaker chimed a note of confusion. According to the schedule, no one had requested speaking time. According to protocol, provisional members could not request speaking time at all. Yet here stood this human, calm and confident. Waiting for the chamber to fall silent, Ambassador Krathfer of the Virax was now very much awake. His species respected boldness, and this tiny human female had just shown more boldness than most species managed in their first millennium of membership. He let out a low rumble of amusement. "The infant species wishes to address the council," he called out, his voice carrying easily across the vast chamber. "How delightfully ambitious! I was not aware humans had learned to use their translator drones properly yet." Laughter rippled through certain sections of the chamber. Other delegates simply watched with curiosity. A few of the older species leaned forward with interest. They had learned long ago that unexpected events often proved to be the most important ones. Alina did not react to the mockery. She had prepared for much worse. "Esteemed members of the Galactic Council," she began, her voice steady and clear. "Humanity formally requests emergency consideration of Proposal 7 Alpha. We invoke the right of urgent address, as granted to all member species under Section 42 of the Founding Charter." Now there was real silence. The right of urgent address was an ancient provision that allowed any member species to bring a matter before the Associate Council without prior scheduling. It had not been invoked in over 2,000 years. Most delegates had forgotten it existed. The fact that a provisional member knew about it, let alone had the courage to use it, was shocking enough to freeze the chamber in place. The Cathari speaker recovered first. Her crystalline form resonated with a complex chord that the translators rendered as cautious acceptance. "The right is invoked correctly. The human delegation may present their proposal. However, I must warn the ambassador that frivolous use of this provision carries severe consequences." "I understand completely," Alina replied. "What we propose is anything but frivolous." She raised her hand, and the air above the speaking platform filled with holographic displays. Star maps appeared, showing 17 solar systems scattered across the galaxy. Each system was marked with a red symbol that every delegate recognized immediately: the symbol of quarantine. The symbol of forbidden contact? The Quarantine Accords, Alina said, have governed this council's approach to developing civilizations for 9,000 years. They state that any species which has not yet achieved faster than light, travel must be left alone to develop without interference. Contact is forbidden. Assistance is forbidden. Even observation must be conducted from extreme distances to avoid contamination of their natural development. She paused. Looking around the chamber, humanity proposes the immediate dissolution of these accords. We call for the full integration of all 17 species currently classified as developmentally restricted. We believe the quarantine policy is not protection. It is abandonment. And it must end. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody even breathed, regardless of whether their species required breathing. Then the chamber exploded. The Malinoxy delegation, a hive-minded fungal collective that occupied an entire section of seats, released clouds of agitated spores. Warning alarms immediately activated, containing the biological reaction before it could affect other delegates. The Sarati representative, a serpentine being nearly 30 meters long, uncoiled from her platform with a hiss of outrage that needed no translation. 3 separate delegations began demanding immediate sanctions against the human species. 2 others called for Elena's arrest. Through it all, Elena Vasquez stood perfectly still on the speaking platform. Her expression did not change. Her hands did not shake. She had known this would happen. Humanity had known this would happen. They had spent years preparing for this moment, studying every species, learning every political alliance, calculating every possible reaction. The chaos was expected. What came next was the plan. Ambassador Crathfer watched the human female with new eyes. His species had survived for millions of years by recognizing dangerous opponents. Every instinct he possessed was now telling him something important. This small, fragile human was not afraid. She was not surprised by the violent reaction to her words. She had wanted this. The Vurix delegate settled back in his seat, suddenly very interested in what would happen next. In all his centuries of service, he had never seen anyone so perfectly control a room by appearing to lose control of it. The other species were so busy being outraged that they had not stopped to ask an obvious question. Why would humanity take such an enormous risk? What did they know that the council did not? Crathfer had a feeling they were all about to find out. The chaos continued for nearly an hour. Delegates shouted across the chamber in languages that their translators struggled to process. The Cathari speaker tried repeatedly to restore order, but her harmonic calls were drowned out by the noise. Several species threatened to leave the session entirely. Others demanded that human membership be revoked immediately and permanently. Alina waited. She had learned patience during her years as a diplomat on Earth. She had negotiated peace treaties between nations that had been at war for generations. She had sat across tables from dictators and criminals and people who wanted her dead. Compared to those experiences, waiting for a room full of aliens to stop yelling was almost relaxing. Eventually, the speaker managed to activate the emergency silence protocol. A wave of sound-dampening energy swept through the chamber, forcing every delegate into quiet. In the sudden stillness, Alina could hear her own heartbeat. It was steady. It was calm. Good. The council will maintain order, the speaker announced, her crystalline voice sharp with frustration. The human proposal is unprecedented and provocative, but it has been properly submitted. We will hear the ambassador's reasoning before any votes are taken. Delegate Yithal of the Sarati collective rose from her coiled position. Her species was ancient and proud, and they had been among the original creators of the Quarantine Accords. Her voice dripped with barely controlled anger as she spoke. The reasoning is irrelevant. The Quarantine Accords have protected developing civilizations for 9,000 years. They represent the highest principles of galactic ethics. To interfere with a pre-ascension species is to commit the gravest crime imaginable. We would be stealing their future, corrupting their culture, making them dependent on our technology rather than allowing them to develop their own. Many delegates signaled their agreement. The Accords were considered sacred by most species. They represented a hard-won consensus about how advanced civilizations should treat younger ones. Challenging them was almost unthinkable. Almost. Protected them, Alina said quietly. The chamber went still. Something in her tone made everyone pay attention. You say the Accords have protected developing civilizations for 9,000 years? That is an interesting choice of words. Delegate Yathal. It makes the policy sound noble and generous. But I have a question for the Council. A simple question that I suspect has never been formally asked in this chamber. She gestured, and new data appeared in the holographic display above her. Numbers, charts, timelines. The information stretched back thousands of years. Drawn from the Council's own records, in 9,000 years of the Quarantine Accords, how many restricted species have successfully achieved ascension to Council membership? Silence. Anyone? Alina looked around the chamber slowly, meeting eyes and sensors and perception organs of every kind. Surely someone knows the answer. After all, this is the entire purpose of the quarantine. We leave species alone so they can develop naturally and eventually join us as equals. That is the justification for the policy. So how many have succeeded? More silence. Delegates shifted uncomfortably. Some consulted their data systems. Others simply looked away. I will answer for you, Alina continued. When the Quarantine Accords were established 9,000 years ago, 17 species were designated as developmentally restricted. Today, 17 species remain on that list. In all that time, not a single one has been deemed ready for integration. Not one species has been welcomed into the Council. The success rate of your protection policy is exactly 0%. The words hung in the air like a judgment.
But it gets worse,
Alina said. Of those original 17 species, 4 are no longer on the list. Would anyone like to explain why? Again, silence. Alina nodded as if she had expected nothing else. They are not on the list because they no longer exist. They are extinct. 3 destroyed themselves in wars that consumed their entire worlds. They developed weapons of mass destruction without developing the wisdom to avoid using them. And one species, the Valith of Proxima Centauri 3, was wiped out by an asteroid impact 600 years ago. She pulled up the records of that event, displaying them for all to see. The asteroid was detected by Council monitoring stations 18 months before impact. There was plenty of time to deflect it. The technology required was trivial by galactic standards. A single ship could have saved an entire species. Instead, this Council voted not to intervene, Alina read from the ancient record. The official reasoning stated that intervention would compromise the natural developmental trajectory of the Valith civilization. A majority of delegates argued that the Valith might develop their own asteroid defense systems if given sufficient motivation. They did not. They died. Every single one of them. And this Council watched it happen. Delegate Uthel tried to respond. The situation was more complex than you are presenting. There were debates. There were concerns. We could not know with certainty that the Valith would fail to save themselves. You could not know they would succeed either, Alina replied, and they did not. An entire species is gone because this Council chose philosophy over action. You did not protect them. You abandoned them to their fate and called it wisdom. The Primorian elder finally stirred. The Primorians were the oldest species in the Council, so ancient that their origins were lost in the mists of cosmic history. When they spoke, everyone listened. Their voice resonated directly in the minds of all present. Bypassing the need for translation, the young species does not understand. Their perspective is limited by their brief existence. Interference breeds dependency. Civilizations must earn their place among the stars through struggle and triumph. Those who cannot overcome their challenges are not ready to join us. This is not cruelty. It is the natural order of the universe. Alina turned to face the ancient being. She should have been terrified. The Primorians had witnessed the birth of galaxies. Their power was beyond human comprehension. They could crush her with a thought if they chose. She was not afraid. With all due respect, Elder, I understand your position perfectly. I simply reject it entirely. Humanity knows about struggle. We fought our way into space through blood and sacrifice and centuries of slow progress. We split the atom before we cured common diseases. We walked on our moon using computers less powerful than the toys our children play with. Nobody gave us anything. We earned every step of our journey. She stepped closer to the center of the platform, her voice rising with conviction. But we also learned something that your ancient wisdom seems to have forgotten. The purpose of struggle is not suffering for its own sake. The purpose is growth. And growth is not measured by how much pain you endure alone. It is measured by what you build, what you create, and how you help others rise alongside you. Lena looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. Where we come from. Watching someone suffer when you could help them is not wisdom. It is cruelty, wearing a philosophical mask. And humanity refuses to wear that mask any longer. The Primorian Elder's presence pressed against every mind in the chamber. It was not an attack, but it was certainly a warning. No species had ever spoken to them with such directness. The young ones were expected to show respect. They were expected to understand their place in the cosmic order. This human female had done neither, and yet the elder did not strike her down. They simply watched their ancient consciousness considering her words with something that might have been curiosity. It had been a very long time since anyone had surprised them. Ambassador Krathver seized the moment of silence. The Variks were not known for deep philosophy, but they were excellent at reading the mood of a room. He could feel the chamber shifting. Elena's words had planted seeds of doubt in minds that had been certain for millennia. Now was the time to push back. "Your passion is impressive, human," he said, his massive form rising to its full height. "But passion is not policy. You speak of helping the restricted species, yet you ignore the consequences of such action. When a primitive civilization encounters an advanced one, the primitive culture is destroyed. Their gods become false. Their achievements become meaningless. Their entire identity collapses under the weight of their own inadequacy." He gestured toward the historical displays still floating in the air. "We have seen this happen countless times. Species that were contacted too early became dependent on their benefactors. They lost their drive to innovate. They lost their cultural identity. They became shadows of what they might have been. The quarantine accords exist to prevent this tragedy." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "You raise valid concerns, Ambassador. Cultural contamination is a real danger. History, both galactic and human, is filled with examples of more advanced societies destroying less advanced ones through contact. We do not dispute this. Then what exactly are you proposing?" Delegate Mirthine of the Solari Consortium asked. Their luminous form flickered with genuine interest. The Solari were known for their open minds and their willingness to consider new ideas. "If you accept that contact can be harmful, how do you justify ending the quarantine?" "Because the current system is not actually protecting anyone," Alina replied. "It is simply allowing harm to happen through inaction rather than action. The results are the same. Species are still being destroyed. They are just being destroyed by asteroids and wars and diseases instead of by cultural contact." She pulled up new images in the holographic display. A planet covered in green forests and blue oceans appeared, slowly rotating above the speaking platform. "This is Kepler 442b. The dominant species call themselves the Dilith. They are intelligent, creative, and curious. 6,000 years ago, they were on the verge of a scientific revolution. Their greatest thinkers were developing mathematics and astronomy. They were asking questions about the nature of the universe. They were perhaps 2 or 3 centuries away from discovering basic physics." The image shifted, showing a burst of radiation sweeping across the planet. Then a gamma ray burst from a dying star sterilized the continent where their scientific community was centered. 90% of their scholars were killed. Their libraries were destroyed. Their progress was erased. The survivors fell back into a dark age that has lasted for 6 millennia. Elena's voice was quiet but intense. The Dilith did not fail. They did not lack the potential for greatness. The universe simply rolled dice and they lost. Random chance destroyed their future. And this council, with all its power and technology, watched it happen and did nothing. The chamber was very still. Under the current system, Alina continued, The Deleth will remain in their Iron Age until they either rebuild their knowledge from scratch or go extinct. This could take another 10,000 years. It could never happen at all. And we will sit here in our comfortable stations, congratulating ourselves on our wise non-interference, while generations of intelligent beings live and die without ever knowing that the stars are full of friends who refuse to help them. She turned to face the Primorian elder directly. Speak of struggle as if it were a sacred test. But what is the Dilith's struggle? To reinvent knowledge that already exists? To solve problems we solved millennia ago? That is not a meaningful challenge. That is pointless repetition. The real struggle, the one that matters, is learning to use knowledge wisely. Learning to build a good society? Learning to live together in peace? Those challenges cannot be solved by technology. They must be faced by every species in their own way. And those are the challenges we should be helping the restricted species to focus on. Delegate Ethal coiled tighter with frustration. You speak as if you know better than 9,000 years of galactic wisdom. Your species has existed for barely a moment. You have not seen what we have seen. You have not learned what we have learned. Perhaps that is exactly why we can see what you cannot, Elena replied. You have been doing the same thing for so long that you have stopped questioning whether it works. We are new. We have fresh eyes. And what we see is a system that has failed completely by its own standards. She brought up one final set of data, mentioned earlier that no restricted species has ever achieved ascension. But I left out an important detail. In the same 9,000 years, 42 new species have achieved faster than light travel and joined the Council. Every single one of them was previously unknown. They came from regions of space that had not been surveyed. They developed entirely on their own, without anyone watching over them. Elena let the implications sink in. The species you have been watching are the ones who failed. The ones who succeeded are the ones you did not know about. Your observation itself may be the problem. Your protection may be the poison. At the very least, the data suggests that your policy has achieved nothing positive at all. The Cathari speaker's crystals hummed with distress. She had served on the council for centuries. She had believed in the quarantine accords with complete conviction. Now, for the first time, she found herself wondering if she had been wrong. What would you have us do? She asked finally. We cannot simply contact all restricted species at once. The chaos would be unimaginable. Lena smiled. It was the first genuine smile she had shown since entering the chamber. I am so glad you asked. Lena raised her hand, and the holographic display transformed completely. Gone were the historical records and tragic statistics. In their place appeared detailed schematics, construction blueprints, and operational timelines. The sheer volume of information was staggering. This was not a simple proposal thrown together in haste. This was the result of years of careful planning. Humanity proposes the establishment of the Uplift Initiative, Elena announced. A comprehensive program designed to assist restricted species in their development without destroying their cultural identity or creating unhealthy dependency. She began walking through the displays, explaining each component as she went. We recognize that every species is different. What works for one civilization might destroy another. Therefore, the initiative begins with extensive study. We learn their languages, their cultures, their values, and their current challenges. Only after we truly understand them do we begin any form of contact. The display showed images of human researchers studying alien civilizations from hidden observation posts. Second, all contact is voluntary. We do not force ourselves upon anyone. We make our presence known gradually, carefully, giving the local population time to adjust. If they choose to reject contact, we respect their decision and withdraw. The initiative is not about imposing our values. It is about offering friendship. Ambassador Crathfer leaned forward with interest. And if they accept, what then? Then we help them with whatever they need most, Elena replied. For some species, that might be medical technology to fight diseases that are killing their children. For others, it might be environmental science to prevent ecological collapse. For still others, it might be simply knowing that they are not alone in the universe. The assistance is customized to each species, each situation. each moment in their development. She highlighted a section of the display showing educational materials translated into dozens of alien languages. We share knowledge, but we share it in ways that they can understand and use. We do not give them faster-than-light engines when they have not yet discovered electricity. We help them take the next step in their journey, whatever that step might be. And we do it in partnership with them, not as masters, but as friends. Delegate Ethal hissed with skepticism. Pretty words. But such a program would require enormous resources, thousands of experts, hundreds of ships, infrastructure in every restricted system. You expect us to believe that humanity, a species that has barely learned to travel between stars, has the capability to implement such a program? Elena's expression did not change, but something in her eyes shifted. This was the moment she had been building toward. This was the revelation that would change everything. We do not expect you to believe anything, Delegate. We expect you to observe the evidence. She gestured, and the display changed again. 17 points of light appeared, scattered across the galactic map. Each one was located in a restricted system. Each one was pulsing with activity. Humanity has not been idle during our provisional membership. While you debated our worthiness, while you expected us to sit quietly and learn our place, we were building. In secret, in silence. In every restricted system in the galaxy, the chamber went absolutely still. Even the Primorian Elder's ancient presence seemed to freeze in surprise. These are the Sentinel stations, Elena continued. 17 orbital facilities, one in each restricted system. They're equipped with advanced sensors, medical laboratories, communication arrays, and emergency response capabilities. They have been in position for 3 years, monitoring the restricted species, gathering data, and preparing for this moment. Delegate Ethel's serpentine body uncoiled with shock. You built military installations in restricted space? That is a direct violation of Council law. That is an act of war. They are not military installations, Elena replied calmly. They carry no weapons. They are support facilities designed purely for observation and assistance. And yes, their construction was a technical violation of Council regulations. We acknowledge this freely. The Cathari speaker's harmonics rose to a pitch of alarm. You acknowledge violating our laws? You confess to this crime before the entire Council? And we would do it again. Elena's voice was steady and sure. Laws exist to serve justice. When laws fail to serve justice, they must be changed or broken. The quarantine accords have failed. They have led to extinction and suffering while providing no benefit to anyone. We chose to prepare for a better way. She turned to address the full chamber. Let me be clear about what humanity is proposing. We are not asking for permission to help the restricted species. We are offering the Council an opportunity to participate. The Sentinel stations are already in place. Our personnel are already trained. Our protocols are already developed. If this proposal passes, we will work together with the Council to implement the Uplift Initiative. We will share our resources, accept oversight, and integrate our efforts with existing galactic institutions. Elena paused, letting the weight of her next words sink in. If this proposal fails, we will proceed anyway. Alone if necessary. We will not abandon 16 intelligent species to suffer and die, because this Council could not find the courage to change. The chamber erupted again, but this time the noise was different. There was still outrage, yes. But there was also something else. Excitement. Hope. A sense that something genuinely new was happening for the first time in millennia. Ambassador Krathfer rose to his full height, his massive form dominating his section of the chamber. His species had been warriors for millions of years. They understood threats. They understood power. And they understood when someone was not bluffing. You would act against the will of the Council, he asked. You would accept expulsion? Sanctions? Perhaps even military consequences. Elena met his gaze without flinching. We would accept whatever consequences come. But we would not accept doing nothing while others suffer. That is not who we are. That is not who humanity will ever be. The Verax ambassador was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, his expression shifted into something that might have been a smile. "The Verax Confederation has not been impressed by many species in our long history," he said. "But I find myself impressed now. Your audacity is magnificent. Your conviction is genuine. And your argument, though it pains me to admit it, has merit." He turned to address the chamber. "The Verax vote in favor of the human proposal. Let it be recorded." The shock that followed was profound. The Verax were one of the most powerful and traditional species in the Council. Their support could shift the balance of votes dramatically. Suddenly, what had seemed like an impossible fantasy began to look like it might actually happen. Alina allowed herself a small smile. The plan was working, but the hardest part was still to come. The debate continued for 27 hours. Species that had been allies for millennia found themselves on opposite sides. Ancient rivalries were set aside as former enemies discovered unexpected common ground. The political landscape of the galaxy was being redrawn in real time. Everyone knew it. The Melanoxy Collective, after hours of internal communication, announced their support for the proposal. They had long felt that the quarantine accords were too rigid, too absolute. The human plan offered flexibility and compassion in ways that appealed to their communal nature. The Serati remained opposed. Delegate Euthal argued passionately that humanity was too young, too inexperienced, too dangerous to be trusted with such responsibility. She warned that the Uplift Initiative would lead to chaos, to dependency, to the destruction of natural development patterns that had evolved over billions of years. The Solari Consortium voted in favor, swayed by Elena's data about the 0% success rate of the current policy. If the quarantine accords were not working, they reasoned, then trying something new could hardly make things worse. Several smaller species abstained, uncertain which side to support. A few demanded more time to study the proposal. Others called for amendments and modifications that would take years to negotiate. Through it all, Alina remained on the speaking platform. She answered questions. She addressed concerns. She debated delegates who had been practicing politics since before her species learned to control fire. She did not waver. She did not retreat. She held her ground with a determination that earned grudging respect even from her opponents. Finally, the Cathari speaker called for the vote. The chamber fell silent as each delegation submitted their decision. The counting process was ancient and complex. Designed to weight votes according to species population, territorial holdings, and contribution to galactic society. Humanity's vote counted for almost nothing. They were too new, too small, too insignificant by galactic standards. It did not matter. They had already done what they came to do. They had started a conversation that could not be stopped. The final count was displayed for all to see. In favor, 24 species. Against 20 species. Abstaining, 3 species, including the Primorian elders, who had remained silent throughout the final hours of debate. The proposal had passed. By a margin of 4 votes, Alina closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to feel the magnitude of what had just happened. 9,000 years of galactic policy had been overturned in a single day. The quarantine accords were ended. The Uplift Initiative was approved. Everything was about to change. The chamber dissolved into organized chaos as delegates rushed to form new alliances, demand clarifications, and position themselves for the transformation to come. Centuries of established relationships were being reconsidered. New possibilities were being imagined. The galaxy had been shaken out of its ancient patterns, and no one knew quite what would happen next. Ambassador Krathfer made his way through the crowd to Elena's position. He towered over her, his predator's eyes unreadable, its massive form blocking out the light from the nearby holographic displays. Any human would have been terrified. Alina simply looked up at him and waited. "You gambled everything," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the noise of the chamber. "If the vote had failed, your species would have been expelled from the council. Your secret stations would have been destroyed. You might have faced military action. You knew all of this, and you proceeded anyway." Lena nodded. "We knew." "Why?" "You could have waited." built your power base over centuries, made alliances, played the long game as every successful species has done since the Council was founded. Why take such an enormous risk? Alina was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. When she spoke, her voice was soft but certain. Because somewhere in the Kepler system, there is a young Dalith looking up at the stars tonight. She is wondering if anyone else is out there. She is asking herself if the universe is empty and cold, or if it might be full of wonders she cannot imagine. She has been asking that question for her entire life, as her parents did before her, and their parents before them. Going back 6,000 years to the moment when her ancestors lost everything, Lena met the Verax ambassador's gaze without flinching. We could not wait 1,000 years to answer her. We could not wait another century, another decade, another single day. Every moment we delayed was a moment of unnecessary suffering. Every year we waited was a year of wasted potential. We came to the stars not to accumulate power or play political games. We came to make friends. We came to help. And we refused to let anything stop us from doing that. Krathfer studied her for a long moment. His species had conquered worlds. They had destroyed civilizations that stood in their way. They understood power and dominance and the cold calculations of survival. They did not understand this. They did not understand the willingness to sacrifice everything for strangers you had never met. And yet, somehow, standing before this small human female, the ancient warrior felt something he had not experienced in centuries. He felt humbled. Slowly, deliberately, he extended one massive clawed hand in a gesture that was sacred among his people. It was an offer of respect between equals, given only to those who had proven themselves worthy through extraordinary deeds. "The galaxy will never be the same," he said. Alina took his hand without hesitation. Her small fingers barely wrapped around a single claw, but her grip was firm and steady. That is exactly the point. Out. In the cycles that followed, the Uplift Initiative faced countless challenges. Political opposition continued from species who believed humanity had overstepped. Logistical problems emerged as the Sentinel stations began their work. Cultural clashes occurred as first contact protocols were tested in the field. Not every restricted species welcomed the arrival of visitors from the stars. Not every council member honored the vote, but the work continued. Slowly, carefully, one species at a time. The galaxy began to change. On Kepler 442b. The first contact team spent 3 years learning the Deleth language and culture before making their presence known. They appeared as travelers from a distant land, sharing stories and ideas, asking questions and listening to answers. They helped cure a plague that had been killing children for generations. They taught new farming techniques that doubled crop yields. They did not give the Dileth advanced technology. They gave them hope. And one evening, as the sun set over the ancient forests of that distant world, a young Deleth female looked up at the sky and saw something new. A point of light that had not been there before. A star that moved and glowed and pulsed with colors she had never seen. It was the Sentinel station. Finally revealing itself after years of hidden observation, its lights blazed against the darkness like a promise. It's like an answer to the question her species had been asking for 6,000 years. She was not alone. None of them were alone. The stars were full of friends. They had come at last. In the grand chamber of Valanthos Prime, a new plaque was added to the speaking platform. It bore a simple inscription, translated into every language of the Council. The measure of a civilization is not what it achieves alone, but how it lifts others as it rises. Let this be remembered. Humanity had come to the stars, not to conquer them, but to light them. And in doing so, they had reminded the galaxy what it meant to truly be civilized. The work was only beginning. But for the first time in 9,000 years, the future looked bright.